Now, one thing that is very important in such kinds of extended sentences and discussions is that you have to use linkers. So you have to link one sentence with the next sentence. You can connect your sentences using linkers. To add a sentence to something, so you make a point and then you want to add another point to that. So you can say also, and, additionally. So you say, also, I would like to say that, or and an additional point is that, or furthermore, I wish to say, moreover, not only, but also. When you want to put 2 points together, you'll say not only this, but also this. Right? And then another linker that we often use is besides. Besides being such and such, besides being important, this is also economically useful. So something like that. When we say besides, we mean together with. Both points are relevant. So when you use these linkers, this will help you to prove the point that you are making. So you make a point, and then in order to prove it, you will then add to it. And you will add to it by linking that earlier point with the next one. So you will say and, additionally, furthermore, etc. Okay. Now, if you want to express an opposite idea, so you made 1 point, let's say you made 1 point, and then after that you want to make another point. But that point is different from, or it's opposite to, the first point that you made. At that point, you should then use some contrasting linker, like but. So you give 1 point, and then you say but. That means that you are going to give the opposite point. Or you say however, and when you say however, you raise your voice a little bit. So you notice the way I'm saying it. It indicates that I have not come to the end of my sentence. This is a rise in the tone. It says however. So that indicates that you have something more to say. And what you have to say is something which is opposite to what you have said earlier. You want to contrast it to what you have said earlier. So, you can also use phrases like, on the other hand. So, we use this commonly. On one hand, such and such. On the other hand, this. On one hand, this. On the other hand, this. That is also a way of linking 2 points, which are opposite. So, on one hand, you give 1 point. And on the other hand, you give the opposite point to that. Also, there are phrases like on the contrary. On the contrary also tells you about something which is different or opposite. Then there are some other linkers like though, although, rather than. So when you say, though it is so, that means you want to say that even though something is there, but the opposite is also there. That is why you say though and although. When you want to point some opposition, you would say rather than. So rather than buy expensive books, a person may use a library. So listen to this sentence. Rather than buy expensive books, a person may use a library. What does that show us? That you have started the sentence with speaking this phrase rather than. Rather than buy expensive books. That means that instead of buying the expensive books, what is the alternative? You can use a library. Okay? So when you have to present an alternative, that's where you will say rather than, in spite of, alternatively, whereas. So you can use these phrases, but remember you have to use them a little differently. For example, you can say an alternative to buying books is to use the library. Alternative. Or you can reform the sentence in a different way. You can say, whereas buying books is expensive, using a library is much cheaper, much more convenient. So you can give that example by using the word whereas. Whereas buying books is expensive, it indicates that you're going to give the opposite or the alternative to it. When we use this phrase in spite of, so in spite of the good weather, in spite of, that means even though there was good weather, in spite of the good weather, the crops did not flourish. So you can say that in spite of certain circumstances. So remember, every phrase has to be used with a lot of care. Think about it before. So one thing I can tell you that in preparing for the speaking test, try to write down these phrases, and then once you've written them down, then try to construct sentences where you might use these phrases or these linkers. And you will realize that all linkers cannot be used in all circumstances. You will have to think quite carefully. You will have to understand which linker is appropriate in that sentence. So this is something you will not perhaps be able to determine when you're actually speaking in the discussion in the test. This you have to prepare beforehand. You have to see what kind of sentence you will use a particular linker. But when you use these linkers, it shows that you are actually considering both aspects of the subject, that you are discussing the subject in detail. You are looking at first one aspect, then another aspect. This is what you need to do. You need to consider all the aspects. And finally, when you want to emphasize your point, remember that examiner also emphasizes certain points. You also have to emphasize a certain point. You have to stress the words. So if you're expressing a point which you believe in completely, then you will say, use a word like certainly, definitely, absolutely, surely. These sorts of words you will use. Also, please try to pay attention to the way in which I'm speaking these words. Do you understand the stress pattern? We have looked at stress pattern earlier also in the earlier lesson. So what you can do is you can pause for a minute and try and stress these words. Speak them out aloud. Speak the word with stress. Certainly. So where is the stress? Certainly. On the first part of the word. Then definitely. Definitely. So the stress is again on the first part of the word. When you say absolutely, where do you hear the stress? Absolutely. It's on lute. It's on the second part of the word. Okay? So speak these words to yourself. Speak them out aloud and try and get the understanding of the stress pattern of these words. How you are going to emphasize one part of the word, and that will give your speech a certain amount of force, certain amount of emphasis in making your point. When you have to stress something, when you have to emphasize your point, you're pretty sure about it, you would use this kind of stress pattern. So please practice this.